did not give me any trouble when I was giving talks there, but that's all right. Anyway, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah. Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, we're once again having a discussion with Brother Leslie Terbesi, otherwise known as Abdul Karim. He's in Malaysia, uh, walking very carefully these days because the panopticon has encircled the globe, and one has to be a bit careful what one says, depending upon how you say it and where you are and whose company you are. Mm-mm-mm-mm. Well, not a very pleasant prospect, but we're doing our best to uncover what must be uncovered. And this is specifically the apocalypse of Islam, what has come to us as Islam. And that's what we're discussing here. That's what we're trying to participate in the revisionist movement here that's been going on for the last 50, 60 years. And I have not recently awakened to it. I was awoken to the revisionist movement years ago, but I had no opportunity to participate in it because everywhere I turned within the traditional Muslim community, uh, revisionism was blocked somehow. It was marginalized, and I eventually became marginalized as well. But um, those of us who wish to pursue this are doing it as best we can under the restricted circumstances, and this is an opportunity that we have by virtue of the internet capabilities, which will no longer become more and more stringent and more and more strangulating, if you will. So we'll take advantage of it while we can here. The apocalypse, that term, everybody thinks, oh, it's just a big end of the world uh, schema where we're going to have wars and rumors of wars, but that's not what the word means. If we look back at its original meanings, which are ignored for the most part these days, it simply means an uncovering, an unveiling. And specifically with respect to the Injil, the New Testament, what's come to us as the New Testament, it refers to the revelation of the man of sin. Okay, now this doesn't mean a particular individual. This is in reference to an entire political system, you know, an entire political system under the auspices of what Muslims might want to call our Dajjal or the Beast or the Antichrist, however you want to refer to it. The terms are almost interchangeable at a certain level of understanding. And so, what we're trying to do here is reveal this man of sin being the Antichrist posture. And that posture is antithetical to the development, the spiritually mature development of the human soul. So, that is what Al Quran was brought to us to complete, to reveal, to uncover itself, the man of truth, if you will, the man of obedience, the man of submission, the reborn individual who has overcome the lower nature of the nafs, that nafs part of us that is totally submitted to desire. We need to modify those desires. It doesn't mean we need to deny them. It means we need to modify them so that they are held in check. And in check means in balance, you see. The middle path, Islam is always the middle path. And so we want to avoid extremism in our approach on this journey back to our Creator. So I have a couple of questions here. I'm going to try and rephrase. I'm going to try and phrase it in a general sense so that I leave the question, the floor open, dear brother. We've been talking about uh, the ways in which early antithetical ulema, if you will, have overwhelmed us and overwhelmed al-Islam with a less than favorable approach to the true nature of religion, the true nature of our approach to this spiritual maturity, if you will. Now, part of that was, as you said on several occasions, the repression of reason, the repression of free thought. Now, um, that's that led to murder. It led to all sorts of fitna. And as I review the history that we do have access to, we don't have access to all of it. I've always thought, I've had a suspicion, if you will, that there are many, many books which have not been exposed or translated. And many of these books were not necessarily written by those with political power. So, we know that history that comes to us is often written by the so-called victors, if you will, and they have their bias and they have their reasons for doing this. And generally speaking, that reason is plunder, one way or another. The plunder of souls, the plunder of means, the plunder of wealth, the plunder of power. It all goes in that same direction. People want to become authoritarian and they want to become intolerant of anyone who doesn't agree with them. Well, that's normal. Okay, that's the normal striving that men have always had to deal with. The guy with the bigger spear, the bigger bicep, the larger army, the better gang, the better organization. The intention there is to overcome one's enemy, and that's not always an easy thing to do. It's a challenge, and Quran often tells us, "Oh, yeah, well, sometimes you have to do things that you don't want to do, and war is one of them. But you don't remain there. You don't stand on that port. You prepare for it, and you fight when you have to, and you fight to defend." Yourself, you fight to defend the innocent and the helpless. So that's okay. That's al-Islam. That's not necessarily attributable just to our prophet. That's common sense, you see, and that's part of our fitra. So we didn't have to rewrite the laws to make Islam an offensive sort of religion, now did we? But that's what happened, you see. Now, in the midst of this particular approach to creative melee making and creative bloodletting, there were also all kinds of Gnostic religious persuasions all over the Middle East, no matter where you went, in which direction, east Rome, west Rome, south to Africa, everyone was practicing something that was not of a monotheist nature, even though they might have called it monotheism. So we had all these Gnostics running around, and they were given, it seems to me, they were given much more of a freer hand than I think our beloved prophet would have permitted had he lived. After his death, and especially after the death of Ali, and even during that melee, I'm sure they had a hand in it. In any case, we've talked about the hadith and we've talked about what came to us as the sunnah as not being entirely reliable. We'll just leave it at that. But along with this that came to us, there were all sorts of practices that I think were not necessarily the sunnah. Uh, it's my understanding that's the case, but I don't have primary knowledge of this, and we all have to deal with secondary knowledge from perhaps primary sources or secondary sources or tertiary sources on this matter as historians and as students of this particular history. And it has occurred to me as I read about these things that, well, most of the histories, now correct me if I'm wrong, this is why I'm bringing it up, because I think you have a greater insight here and much more knowledge on the facts than I do. And I'm asking this question on behalf of myself and our listeners, because many of our listeners have not gone much beyond the madrasa or high school or, you know, traditional universities, and nobody's really interested in the Muslim history, if you will. But those of us who are concerned with its revision, we're very interested in it. So I'm wondering that we have the history from these same sources that gave us the Sunnah, gave us the Hadith, which are unreliable, and so I can only it's only common sense that you would say, well, is this Sunnah reliable? Are these rituals reliable? Are these practices that they've handed us reliable? Or are they a conflation, you see, that came to us from other sources, other religions? For example, we know that Manichaeism was there at the time, and it was had a strong influence in the Persian caliphate, so there were very, very famous families involved, apparently, and they were sourced in a religion that was sourced from a Jewish Christian mystic named Mani. And this guy was a bit off his rocker, but he was well entertained, well funded, and well appreciated by these people. And many of his practices seem to have been incorporated into what came to us as the Sunnah. At least that's what some writers have said. That I've written, and I think some of our listeners are also reading these same sources. So I want to get to the root of it, or as close to the root of it as we possibly can, because we not only have influences from Mani, who was influenced by various other Aryan influences, even extending from India, as was the Arabian Peninsula. It was inundated with Hindu beliefs and systems and rituals. And part of these rituals were actually something that approached the Hajj. I mean, the shaving of the head, the wearing of these white flowing garments, running around and doing the human mantra, if you will, the circumambulation. It was all part of Hindu worship. And this is incontrovertible. So I'm wondering how much of that entered Islam along with the Hadith and the mistranslations, not the changing of the Quran. The Quran is sacrosanct, and Allah Himself says in the Quran He's going to preserve it, so it can't be changed. But the translations were changed, and the translations often omit certain major connotations that have a completely different meaning, you see, other than what's been accepted by traditionalists. So if that's happened, I'm wondering how much has happened ritually, in the same fashion, because all of this happened at the same time, those first 300 years. And by the time we get to the Abbasids, there's a certain concreteness that is set in after all this dust has settled from the fitna of those years. So I'm wondering how much of this we can rely on too. Um, I don't know how else to phrase this question. It's a big can of worms, and forgive me if I'm just throwing this at your feet, but that's what I'm doing. So I'm sure you've given these things some thought, and I'd like to hear, and I'm sure that our listeners would like to hear what your thoughts are, what you've learned, what you can confirm, what you can question, what you can say, scratch your head about, say, I'm not sure, but I think, you know, this sort of thing. Help us out here as much as you can, inshallah.
Yeah, thank you, Brother Omar, for having me once again on your, I think, very interesting show. And yeah, before I begin, can I just give me a couple of seconds to switch on the cooling system here? I forgot to
Sure,
switch.
go right ahead. Hmm.
I feel I need to switch on a cooling system because it seems to me that we, not just because of the air in the room, but the topic itself is quite hot as well. So
Yes, it is.
we have to remain cool heads, especially.
Yes.
So, yeah, so how do I begin? Yeah, I would like to first of all point out that your mention about rituals. I have been wondering myself about it, and my own impression from my studies, research, which it's been going on for maybe about 20 years now, since I was hired by the Islamic Science University in Malaysia in 2002. So of course you go through a process, a progression. That first, you know, when you are a new kid on the block, so to speak, you don't dispute too much with the people around you, because you feel that, well, they know better than I'm the new kid on the block. You know, am I going to teach you know, born and raised Muslims who have been Muslims their whole lives about
Hmm.
Islam? I kind of listen. I did not come out. How do I put this? I remember there was the one time. I don't know if I mentioned this in one of our previous discussions, but one of my colleagues said in a group, we were about 4 or 5 of us, that he stated a foundational principle of traditional Sunni tafsir or exegesis, which is encapsulated in the words of the Arabic goes like this: as sunnah qadia ala Quran. That means the sunnah judges the Quran. So, of course, when I heard that, I was shocked. What they mean by judge is that it explains, you see, the Quran. This is a basic principle of traditional tafsir exegesis. So, what shocked me is that it seemed to imply a reversal of the relationship between Quran and Sunnah.
Hmm.
Here we are talking exegesis or tafsir, because when then you look at jurisprudence or fiqh, there, which is a sister discipline, and they are depend on each other. Jurisprudence
Hmm.
depends on tafsir, right? You cannot deduce laws from the source unless you know what the source is saying. So the first thing
Hmm.
to do is to understand the source of the deen and the source of the law, the Quran. And for that, you need obviously a suitable methodology, one that will not distort your knowledge of what Allah Ta'ala is trying to teach us. So I
Hmm.
was really quite shocked because in fiqh, in jurisprudence, the relationship between Quran and Sunnah is such that the Quran stands at the top, so to speak. I don't want to say pyramid because it's associated with Firaun,
Yes, of course.
but it is the top authority,
Hmm.
followed by the Sunnah, then that is followed by Ijma, consensus of the scholars or maybe the community. Different people define the Ijma differently. Some people completely reject Ijma, and then comes Ijtihad or the individual juristic effort, and then I think 4 other sources of the law of the Sharia. So when I heard this statement that the Sunnah judges the Quran, I was quite taken aback. And I felt that I should respond, but I think I related this story before. So there were like 2 voices in my head. There was a discussion going on. One voice was
Hmm.
speak up and you know, express your reservations. Another voice was telling me maybe you should you know, slow down because it's possible you didn't hear correctly. That was the last thought that I had, which kind of ultimately convinced me not to say anything, because I thought maybe, well, what if I didn't hear him correctly? Then, you
Hmm.
know, then you will just make a fool out of yourself and what have you. So I didn't say anything. But later, as time went by, I realized that other people shared this concern about that particular principle of
Hmm.
tafsir and about other things as well. And perhaps I can mention the work of Muhammad Shahrur and Dr. Omar Ramahi, both of whom have expressed serious reservations, and not only them, but even the neo-traditionalist Abdul Hamid Abu Sulaiman, who was formerly director of the International Islamic University of Malaysia. I think he was the second rector, the Saudi fellow, but he was also active in the IIIT Institute in the United States, in Virginia, the International Institute of Islamic Thought. He also informed us on numerous occasions that the methodology of Islam requires reform. Now, he didn't say that Islam itself requires a reform. If you understand Islam correctly, then there's nothing to reform.
But how long ago did he make that statement?
That the English translation appeared in 1993. There was an Arabic version of it earlier. I think it came out 1 or 2 years before that. So quite a long time ago, 22, almost years ago.
Yeah.
So I think he made some valid points. And other people have expressed, the point that, like Zaki Badawi, for example, he was the chief imam of the London Central Mosque, a PhD Al-Azhar graduate also of Al-Azhar himself. And he actually was our advisor at the university. At the Islamic Science University in Malaysia, he mentioned similar things, that yes, we have the traditional methodology, but now we have to move on, you see. And he suggested taking Shatibi's approach, referring to the higher objectives of the Sharia as one possible way to move forward, in a methodology of our understanding of the Quran. And I remember, in fact, there was even a chap that even argued, his name slips my mind for the moment, but he was arguing for the greater role of reason in exegesis and jurisprudence. And how I found out about it is when I was reading the last chapter of my former boss and mentor's book, Professor Dr. Muhammad Hashim Kamali. In his last chapter, but in the UK edition, I might add, he actually critiqued this fellow, and he was saying that this was not a great idea. But I would kind of side, not that I want to, as it were, how to put it. I also have come to the conclusion that there needs to be a greater role for reason than we find in traditional Islamic exegesis and jurisprudence. I don't know, maybe it's because I myself have been trained in philosophy, political philosophy to be more precise, and political theory. And of course, in the Western tradition, Enlightenment, what have you, but even in the Greeks and classical tradition, reason and logic, logos, was a very important concept, because it, the question and answer method, the dialectical method, or basically the dialogue, where you progress from ignorance or mere opinion to knowledge by examining various opinions and eliminating the weak ones, and then presumably what you are left with, you can designate it as knowledge, or more or less. So, but later, as I went on and began to, delve into the matters deeply, especially after I joined the International Institute of Advanced Islamic Studies 5 years later, I had the opportunity to delve in more deeply into the matters, and I began to notice a pattern that, and even I could perhaps add that one of the papers I wrote, my first paper that I wrote at the Islamic University, I made a reference to rationalism and something to the effect that Islam is a rational religion. And my neighbor, who was a professor from Somalia, Dr. Hersi Hilole, kind of advised me that I probably want to go gentle or be careful with referring to rationalism.
Did he?
Yeah, he did. Because he said I could be accused of being a rationalist or a Mu'tazilite, and traditional Sunnis consider the rationalists and the Mu'tazilites to be outside of the fold of Islam.
I see.
So they apparently in the old days they even had a name for these people, and I got this information from the book by Dr. Omar Ramahi called Muslims' Greatest Challenge 2019. It's available on Amazon, and actually I'm reading through it. I'm finding it very interesting, and I certainly highly recommend it to anyone. I think his book and Shahrul's book really are in a class of their own. Because they somehow go deeper into the issues, a little deeper than people like perhaps not to be disrespectful in any sense to doctors Abdul Hamid Abu Sulaiman and Taj Abir Rahmani, The Dr. Shahrur and Dr. Ramahi, I think, are a little bit more daring, in sailing into uncharted waters. And as you know, there's always a danger when the bold sailors sail into uncharted waters that there might be some reefs that you don't know under the surface, and your ship could end up stuck on a reef. So, but so far I
Mm-hmm.
haven't found that in either of their works. So far, I think they have been really hitting the target and a bullseye, so to speak, even. So, what I'm trying to say is that my own, as I, got deeper and deeper into the subject matter, I began to sort of discern a sort of pattern, and anti-rationalism had a lot to do with it, and I
Mm-hmm.
myself have become a little more outspoken now than in the old days when
Mm-hmm.
I was about the reference to rationalism. And by the way, did you know that Muhammad Assad's translation of the Quran was banned in Saudi Arabia because the reason given was that it is a rationalist translation?
Oh, I see.
In other words, a
Well,
Muttazilite translation, you
mm-hmm.
see. So, and in the old days, the ulama, the traditionalist ulama, had a derogatory term for the people who use their reason, and the term was aqlaniyun.
Well,
That is the plural.
interesting.
Yeah, the aqlaniyun, the people who use their reason. In other words, using your
Mm-hmm.
brain was considered a weakness, a sin, or something to
Mm-hmm.
be avoided. And the word singular is aqlani, so that was a derogatory term, you see.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that, but my understanding of the whole situation is that actually rationalism did not undermine Islam. In fact, actually, it was the backlash against rationalism and the repression of
Mm-hmm.
reason that was at the bottom of the eventual decline of the Muslim civilization, because Allah Ta'ala Himself says that we should use our reason. أَفَلَا تَعْقِلُونَ أَفَلَا تَتَفَكَّرُونَ. And the tadabbur, or pondering, is also strongly emphasized. And there are two verses. The verse 100 in Surah number 10 says that Allah will place confusion on the people who refuse to use their reason. And in verse 22 in Surah number 8, Allah refers to the people who don't use their reason as the worst of creatures, the worst of creatures.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm really puzzled how the ulama have managed to strip Islam, the teaching of the Quran, of its emphasis on rationality. Even the word kalb, which is normally rendered as heart in all modern translations, with a very small number of exceptions, and even in modern Arabic, the word kalb now means heart. But as Dr. Omar Ramahi points out in the book I already mentioned, in Quranic Arabic, the word kalb had a different meaning. So,
Mm-hmm.
what was this different meaning if it did not mean heart in the Quranic Arabic? He claims, he states, and I have two or three other references to confirm this. He states that the word kalb actually means the brain or the mind. So, when Abdullah Yusuf Ali translates that they have, hearts with which they don't understand. Actually, it means they have minds with which they don't understand.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
a very big difference.
exactly. So there's a shift of emphasis from thinking to feeling. You see, from reflection
Mm-hmm.
to emotion. You see, this is
Yes,
from
yes.
to passion, if you like, if you want
Well,
to
if
reduce.
if kalb means mind, what is the Arabic word for heart?
Fuad.
Mm.
Yeah, so like when Musa put her baby into the basket in the river,
Mm-hmm.
her fuad, her heart suddenly felt empty. You see, she
Yes.
was sad
Okay.
because she parted with the boy, but of
Yes.
course, in
Mm-hmm.
reunited and what have you.
Mm-hmm.
So, and another person who confirmed this to me, one time I mentioned this very comment in one of our clubhouse rooms, and there's a fellow by the name of Anan, and he is a very articulate chap also, originally from Saudi Arabia, and
Mm-hmm.
interestingly, he told me that his grandfather was also a major scholar in Saudi Arabia, and he apparently even worked pretty much in the same office or next door to guess who, Ibn Baz himself.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you have heard about Ibn Baz. He was the chief mufti of Saudi Arabia for some time, and he
Mm-hmm.
declared it when was it a certain year that the Earth is flat, and
Yes.
anybody
Yes.
who doesn't agree with that has left a fold of
Mhm.
Islam and basically has to be killed more or less, because that's normally
How,
what
how long ago was that?
Yeah, I can maybe send you a video, because somebody just
Mm-hmm.
sent me a video where this claim was repeated, and
Mm-hmm.
there the chap actually identifies the year in which this happened. But some of the
Yeah.
things I have read on Ibn Baz website, I'm totally shocked. We can touch on
Well,
that later.
to just frankly, I exile flat earthers. I won't have anything to do with them.
I don't
You
blame
know,
you.
no,
I mean, what did he say that if that things could fall off the earth if the earth was round. I mean, it's astonishing that
yeah,
some
yeah,
and you put this in the public domain. Okay, it's one thing to share it in private if you believe
uh
in a flat. And there, by the way, there's another Quran centric person. By the way, his name is Sam Gerrans. He also subscribes to the flat Earth theory.
Goodness me,
And,
goodness me.
and we have
But
at least one brother in our clubhouse rooms also subscribes to the flat Earth. I'm
you
amazed. I don't know.
know, I won't have anything to do with it, with these people. I just had to, literally, I evicted a flat earther from a facility, an apartment we have to rent here just a few months ago. Absolutely absurd. And this guy presented himself as a Muslim who was going to help us establish a little community here and, do things organically and do an actual farming. He's a flat earther. And 6 weeks after he arrived here, he tried to convince me the earth was flat. And I said, well, basically what you're saying is that it's a great big bathtub and God's got the plug, right? So
Yeah, this is
anyway, let's get back to this heart
yeah,
business. What can, what,
yeah,
this is amazing to me, you see,
yeah,
that cow can be misplaced with the translation
yeah.
for heart as rather than mind, which refers to our faculty of reason, and and these people just accept it. I mean, how is it possible that this goes on for 1,200 years? For God's sake,
Well,
I mean, these people are supposed to be intellectuals, right?
absolutely supposed to be. Yeah, I mean, probably a similar reason why the Christians accepted the doctrine of Trinity for also more than 1,000 or how many years? You see,
Yes.
lack of a people don't think very deeply, and they often
Uh,
contradict themselves. And I mean, local Islamic universities offer PhD degrees in various disciplines. The
mhm.
word PhD means Doctor of Philosophy,
Yes.
but they don't have a single department of philosophy in these universities.
Yes.
They don't offer any courses in philosophy, not even at the undergraduate level. So this is
Yes.
kind of ironic that they offer degrees which are called Doctor of Philosophy degrees, and you don't have to
Mhm.
take a single course in philosophy to get a Doctor of Philosophy degree.
Mm.
But that's partly because philosophy, as you know, acquired a bad reputation in a Muslim community, partly due to the efforts of Al-Ghazali and others. But
Mhm.
my perception is that actually what harmed the Muslim community was precisely the reverse. It was the rejection of rationality and reason, because many other things follow from it. One was the evolution of the so-called traditional Islam, which was underpinned also by the doctrine of predestination. The moment you reject cause and effect, you will have predestination.
Mhm.
And that's Imam al-Ghazali basically subscribed to that. So the moment you have predestination, you absolve individuals of all responsibility for their actions. You actually you are opening the door to corruption, to the spread of corruption and facade, because people can say whenever they commit a crime, well, I didn't do it, Allah will did, you see. So this is
Yes.
an
Yes.
incredible blow
Mhm.
against ethics and morality
Mhm.
in Islamic civilization, which, by the way, was reinforced by the fact that people like Bukhari do not have not considered it important or necessary to include in their collections of hadith books on precisely this issue on ethics, because you will not find any book on ethics in Bukhari, and also on rationality or reason or akal, you will not find any book on reason or akal in Bukhari. And
Yes.
since I'm subject, you will not even find any book on justice in al-Bukhari. But all these three concepts are very, very important, in the
Mhm.
Quran. Freedom. There's no book on freedom. The freedom is important in the Quran. There's no
Yes.
compulsion in religion, you see. So
Mhm.
what has happened is that with the coming of the hadith, the Quran, yeah, I agree. The text itself, the Mus'haf, the transcript of the Quran was not corrupted. Allah protected it.
Mm,
But what about our knowledge of the Mus'haf, our knowledge of the Quran? Do you think it remained intact, or has it been altered or even corrupted? I personally
mm,
believe it has been corrupted, and not just a little corrupted, but very seriously corrupted. And I'm not
mhm,
alone in this. Naqib Alatas also expressed his view that we have a problem of the corruption of knowledge. And his son, Tawfiq
mhm,
Alatas, I met once or twice, also reiterated the point made by his father in at
mhm,
least one video that I saw. So we have a huge problem here because the knowledge has become so distorted. And then, of course, we have the other variant of Islam, another sort of, I call it a mutation. We have two mutations of the original Quranic Islam. One is the traditional Islam with its doctrine of predestination and anti-rational.
mhm,
That was developed for domestic consumption to keep the population docile and obedient to the rulers, that the powers that be. But at the same time, we have another variant or mutation of Islam, which is the political Islamism or political
mhm,
Islam, which was developed for external purposes, for to justify aggression abroad. You see,
mhm,
so Islam is to pacify people at home. The political Islam is to justify aggression, the so-called jihad al-talab abroad. You see, but they
mhm.
are, of course, inconsistent with each other, and both are inconsistent with the original Quranic or revealed Islam that Allah has taught us, is teaching us in the Quran. So, huge problems have arisen because of this misinterpretation, because of the traditional Islam. The Muslim community basically, declined. I don't know if I should use a stronger word or not. Degenerated, perhaps,
Yeah,
and we have,
degeneration. That's what it
yeah,
is. Yeah.
right. We have our last in everything. How many Nobel Prize winners have Muslims produced in the last 800 years? There's an excellent report of a conference that took place in Turkey, I think, in 2018 on education, and the statistics they come up with are just horrible. You
Yes.
know, there's a massive, how many universities, top universities how many Muslim universities do you find in the top 100? Not even one. No, University of Malaya
Mhm,
was 163. And I met the rector, that was Professor Hussein Alatas. He
mhm.
was the leader of that university. So the education, Muslim education, is in shambles. And
Yes.
also in a madrasa, what they teach people is really problematic, because they
Mhm,
emphasize memorization and repetition, regurgitation, parrot-like learning, and they do
mhm.
not place hardly any emphasis on critical thinking. It's like as if thinking was a taboo. And
No.
one of the brothers on Clubhouse just reported earlier today that when he went into a masjid, one of the masjids in his neighborhood one time, and he saw all these hadith books all over the place, and
Mhm,
but he didn't see any Quran book, any Quran. So he went and asked the Imam, "Do you have any Qurans here? Where are they?" And
mhm.
indeed, they did have them, but in the back, in the ladies section, where no men ever go, and where it is very difficult to find him. So when he asked the Imam, "Well, how come that we don't have the Qurans here? I would like to read it."
Mhm.
And the Imam was astonished and jumped up, as it were, and said, "What? No, you cannot read the Quran by yourself. You have to ask your sheikh to explain it to you." So,
Oh my God.
yeah,
Oh
exactly. So
dear. But
this
this
is,
is this is a system that it's systematic arresting development. That's what's
exactly,
taking place here.
yeah. Not only that, but
This
they
is.
are blocking. Yeah, go ahead, brother. I can wait.
Hmm.
So they are blocking people from the way of Allah's fi sabilillah.
Yes.
They are actually
Yes.
putting obstacles in people's way when people want to find out what is Allah trying to communicate to us. This is very,
Yes.
very serious,
Yes.
and it's
Yeah.
very
Yes.
un-Islamic. In fact, I would say it's anti-Islamic. You see what some of
It's
these people are doing.
deeply disturbing.
Deeply
Deeply
disturbed.
disturbing to hear you say this.
They are
I,
deliberately keeping people in the dark. Yeah, Allah says that
well,
He wants to bring us out of the darkness into light.
mm,
Mina zulumati ila nur, but they are doing exactly the reverse. So
well, the system is doing that. I'm not so sure that the individuals are intentionally doing it now. I think they've just, this is just what they've inherited. And
Yes.
they're just going about it the same way that their fathers did. And the Quran makes mention of this on several occasions. So I don't think these people mean anyone harm, but it becomes part of their nature. They do it as a matter of, how shall I say, it's
Like,
unintentionally done.
sure.
It comes out of the subconscious world in which they've inherited, and they just do it. They just do it because this is Islam. This is what they believe Islam is, when in fact it's not at all.
Yeah.
And that's why we're having this conversation, to make it very clear to people that what they think is al Islam is not. It's a perversion, it's a degeneration of what the Prophet actually gave us. And I recall being in a similar position as you described when you first began this session, dear brother. I'm the new kid on the block, and although I have a medical degree and many years of professional practice under my belt, I'm the new kid on the block. I don't speak Arabic. I'm with all these international, thrown into the midst of all these international scholars by Professor Osman Bakar, who read my book on the Trinity and said, "Oh, this guy's got to come here." Gave me a research fellow position, and there I am at the board table with these fellows, and I'm amazed at how they just pursue what was handed to them and refuse to discuss any criticism. I mean, it's the tyranny uh, directly reflected what I experienced as a boy in the Catholic Church. It was the same system, the same social phenomena, the same political phenomena, if you will. No, you just have to conform. No, you can't question this belief. This is what we've inherited. You don't know what you're talking about. Not only do you not know what you're talking about, but you're not capable of knowing.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
see,
Yeah.
so I sat there and I watched this degenerative process evolve. And it just got worse and worse. Everything that Al Hadas did at ISTAC, the international university there, their seat of highest seat of knowledge, as far as I was concerned in Malaysia, was being slowly and surely and systematically eroded, so that even he was erased from the outward appearance. You see, well, yeah, they gave Professor Alatas honor, but in name only, in substance, no. I remember being asked to write a paper, a white paper on reform, and I said, I asked the I've forgotten his name now. He was vice president of the university. He came, and he was vice chair at ISTAC for a while. It might come to his name might come back to me in a minute. Anyway, he asked me to write this paper. I said, "Well, why do you want me to write it?" I said, I'm not." He said, "You're a doctor. That makes you a detective. You know how to find what's wrong. You diagnose the problem and give us the cure." And that was his reasoning. And I said, "Well, that makes sense because that's true. A good doctor is in fact a detective." So I looked at the situation. I said, "Okay, what we need here is we need cultural reform." I wrote the paper and I presented it at the board. And the dean at the time took one look at the paper and said, "No, we can't do this. It's not practical."
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
it's what was needed, you see. But it's not politically practical, you see, because what's practical is to maintain the status quo. That becomes practical. And I saw that, and part of this practicalness was to do things like invite uh, a pedophile cardinal to have a Catholic retreat at the seat of Islamic knowledge in Malaysia, and give him a podium not only from which to teach, but from which to guide the prayer, you see. And I remember striking my fist on the table. I said, "What?" And standing up at the board meeting, I said, "What's wrong with you people? You don't know who your enemies are. How stupid can you be?" I had to apologize to the dean afterwards for losing my temper. But listen, that's what was happening. That's the degree of conformity that took place. And right after that, they invited Madam Clinton and rolled out the red carpet for her at ISTEC, you see. So I'm saying, well, gosh, these people don't know who their enemies are. Either that or this is Stockholm syndrome to the max here, you see. And they're supposed to be expressing the truth of Islam at the highest academic scholarly levels. And I said, no, this cannot be. And I'm still the new boy on the block, you see. And slowly but surely, one of my colleagues come to me and said, well, Dr. Omar, you better make arrangements to go elsewhere. You're not going to have your contract renewed, you see. And that was Professor Ajmal, the one who translated the Mathnawi, you know. Um, so God rest his soul. He passed on about 5 years ago. Anyway, I know this syndrome, the new kid on the block, in the middle of this political expedient academia. And this is not Islam, not at all. So, dear listeners, please hear us and hear what Brother Karim is telling us and informing us of. This has been going on for an awful, awful long time. And it's time to stop it for those who have the will, the mind, and the heart, you see, to withdraw and stop praying behind these people because they are not leading you to guidance. None of them. They're just playing the game. It's the status quo. This approach to Islam has become the status quo, and it is wrong. End of discussion. Not with us, dear brothers. I'm sorry to interject there, but
That's
I
all
just
right.
had to get that off my chest because listening to you is, you said this is heated. You see, this is a heated topic, and
Yeah.
in fact, it is. And I'm a man. I don't trust people who don't get angry. I don't trust people who don't show their disapproval, you see, in some way that is viably justified by their feelings and emotions. I think we have these feelings and emotions, the real cow, if you will, the real heart, if you will, to as a warning sign to say something's wrong, something's wrong. As the new kid on the block, I had this feeling, right? Something's wrong, something's wrong. You see, and believe me, dear ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, there is something wrong with traditional Islam. It's very wrong. So, dear brother Karim, going back to our original question, it seems to me that these misinterpretations at the time, you see, this just to help finish the thought, at the time that they occurred, 1,200 years ago or so, that 12 to 1,400 years ago, um, they were intentional. It seems to me they were very, very intentional, intentionally done for political reasons, for academic reasons, for reasons of tyranny. And I know from my study of the occult that keeping people ignorant is an occult principle. It's an archetypal protocol. Matter of fact, it's a foundation, if you will, you see, of one of the occult principles of political science. Keep them ignorant, and we can tell them whatever we need to tell them, and keep the cattle in the pen or let them loose on the battlefields at the Maginot Line, just so they can be slaughtered. Like the pigs we think they are. This kind of mindset, this is what religious had then, and they have it now. But you see, they intentionally did it then, but now it's being done as a form of mesmerized ensoulment. The traditionalists are possessed by this error. They're possessed by it, and they tyrannize others who wish to follow their fitra and become free of it. This word freedom, you see. And as Brother Bilal says, it's freedom, the freedom to think, the freedom to rationalize, the freedom to do what Allah intends us to do so that we can please Him. Not that we can think freely and just sin freely. No, 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 no. That's what some Jews think. But that's not what Allah's intention is. He came to correct that theological error because they believed it. They thought some of these Jews at the higher level, the Kabbalah, they said, well, we can sin freely in order to redeem our nature. Oh my God! Well, that's what they think. Well, not the Jew in the pew, but some of the Jews at the upper levels of their Chabadnik organizations. That's how they think. You see, this is not something new. This is Sabbateanism, if you will. And if you don't know these matters, you've been kept ignorant of them on purpose. You see, so ignorance, keeping the public ignorant, is a political tool. It's a political tool. It's not religious. Well, you can say it's religious in a certain sense because it becomes part of the ritual. And that's where I began this session, you see, getting to the ritual, because the rituals are a tool. They're a tool of repression, no more than just in a like manner as saluting the flag is. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. God and country, let's go. Give me my gun, give me the pitchfork, give me the bayonet, give me the bombs. Let me push the button. I'll push it. I'll drop it on those bastards. Come on, for God and country. Okay, let's do it for Allah. That's the aggressive war that you're talking about. So if you keep a people repressed, you keep them ignorant of what the Quran really says, then you can get them to do these things. You can get them to commit mass murder, which is what the Fatimids did when they started blocking the Hajj. My God, on one occasion they killed 15,000, on another occasion they killed 30,000. Hey, well, we're in charge here. We got the truth. We got the Batanite Shia truth here, you see. So we're the ones that, that can tell you what to do. Have the Sunnis done this? Yes, they have. Yes, they have. Yes, they have. And they're doing it in modern day, you see. Yes, they have. All you have to do is look at Afghanistan. These come out of madrasas in Pakistan were funded by the CIA. What, you didn't know that? You thought bin Laden did 9/11? Oh my God. I have walked out of conferences where Muslims stood on stage and started blaming and kept on blaming Muslims, you see, for 9/11, the 9/11 fiasco. This kind of ignorance, brother, has become part of traditionalism in Islam. And our task is to ruin it. Our task is to unveil it. And I want to thank you for helping me to do that. Alhamdulillah. Um, any closing remarks, dear brother?
Yeah, you mentioned about how you lost your temper, and a thought
Yes.
crossed my mind that actually there's something worse than losing your temper. And
Mm.
that's what some of the traditionists did. I'm referring to losing your mind.
Ah, yes.
It's a lot worse than losing your temper, and that's what seems to me happen to many of the traditionists.
Yes, yes.
Because by repressing reason, including their own and other people's, they were bereft of reason.
Hmm.
You see. And now in the Western world, what do we do with people that lose their mind, so to speak? Of course, they do it involuntarily. You're a medical doctor, you know that when we have these people, what do we call them, mentally challenged or whatever, they lose their mind. We have a place for them called
Yes.
the asylum for the, for
Hmm.
people with this problem. But what do you do when this kind of disease, spreads? Like Allah says in the Quran, "Fi qulubihim maradun wa fazadahumullahu maradas." He's talking about the disease in the mind, and He
Yes.
increases their disease. You see this ignorance and
Hmm.
things. So, yeah, I think one way to proceed is to rehabilitate our knowledge of revelation, the
Yes.
Quran, And also then we can accomplish this by basically re-engaging reason once again in our effort to get a better understanding of the revelation of the Quran. This is not rocket science. This is common sense as far as I can see. So that's all.
Yes. Well, I want to thank you once again for sharing your knowledge and your time with us. Dear brother, may Allah reward you for that and keep you in His refuge in a responsible fashion. Because that's what we're talking about. We're talking about taking responsibility for knowledge, for real knowledge, for the correct knowledge, for the correct approach to knowledge. And so may Allah prosper us on this path, and may He keep each and every one of you who are listening to us in His refuge, here and hereafter. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.